When I was teaching in the public school system in South Korea, I taught 3rd and 5th grade for a couple of years. One of the students, I got asked a lot of questions, and one day a boy came to me and he said, teacher, Sanseng Nim, hey, in China they have Kung Fu, and Japan they have karate, and here in Korea we have Taekwondo. What is it that you have in America? And I was caught off guard by the question, but I understood where he was going. He asked the question in good form. And my rather off-the-cuff answer was, well, we have guns. And the look on his face was a bit of shock. But it was still a good question, and I've pondered that question many times over the years since. And it's helped me understand a bit more about why we do force-on-force training. More on that in a minute. I'm Dr. Christopher Larsen, a veteran of the U.S. Army Infantry, founder of One Shepherd Leadership Institute, and author of Small Unit Tactical Doctrine. Okay, so staying with the traditions of South Korea, they have 2 types of sword fighting, and I was very fascinated to find this. They have Kumdo and Haedong Kumdo. So Kumdo is your traditional, sword fighting or sword martial art around the sword. What this means is that you spend at least a year, maybe 2, earning your black belt and never touch a steel sword. You don't do that. You have these wooden facsimiles that you are demonstrating all of your form, your body form, your footwork form, and I watched this young woman earn her black belt, and she had to do all these jumps and kicks and flies and cuts and all this stuff with a wooden facsimile. But the one I think that really impressed me is that 2 men came and they turned their very, very sharp swords. They cut felt in the air to demonstrate this. They threw a piece of felt, chop, 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 and there it was. Then they hold their blade with the sharp side up, and they hang a paper loop around the blades. Now you're sure it's going to cut just as it's hanging there, but to add to this difficulty, then they put a piece of wood right into the loops so that while the blades are sitting here, there's an exposed piece of dangling wood between the 2 swords. And this young woman had to come take her wooden facsimile and hit in between that and snap this dangling piece of wood so precisely that the paper didn't get cut on the razor edge of the Kumdo. Brilliant stuff. And obviously I was very impressed. So you're watching this and you're saying, my gosh, that's fantastic. She graduated up to black belt, whereby now, for her 2nd, 3rd, and 4th degree, 4th being the master, she would work only with a steel blade and learn to cut and do all the other things that the masters were doing, which was phenomenal. As a Westerner seeing this, we just don't have that tradition, and it was brilliant. I then found out that they have Haedong Kumdo. And, okay, hold on, what's this? Well, it's very similar to our Olympic-style sword fighting, such as the foil, the epee, and the saber. And what it is it's this pieces of bamboo fastened together almost with a rubber band, and there's an electronic device inside of it, and this is their facsimile of a Kumdo for force-on-force. They fight each other with this, and it is scored electronically, again, much like Western sword fighting. They wear the helmet and the big armor, and they fight one-on-one. They also fight 4-on-4, and they do this wonderful combat. And it simulates it. And they too go through a very rigorous martial art in their dojos. And so anyway, they graduate up through it. But it's an interesting thing. When I was talking to these masters, what they were saying is, oh, well, I don't know how to make a cut. I know how to fight with a sword, but I don't know how to make a cut. I've never really touched a sword except for ceremonial purposes. And I was floored by that. They had spent 20 years of their life mastering this and teaching others how to fight with a sword, as their ancestors did. And they were very capable at this. The flip side was the people who knew how to make the cut, the masters who'd spent 20 years of their lives learning the mastery of the steel, perhaps even forging their own swords, didn't know how to fight tactically with it. They could wow crowds and cut magnificent things, but they didn't know any of the tactics of warfighting with a sword. Well, as odd as that seemed, I started to reflect more and more on us here, back in the United States, with our wonderful tradition of firearms. And darned if we don't have something very similar. That is, that overwhelmingly, the preponderance of shooters know how to fire their weapon system. Fire a firearm. They can put holes in the target using real bullets and moving paper and steel farther and farther and doing some incredibly impressive marksmanship, right? Even to the point where they're getting into trick marksmanship. And that is in fact what a lot of the competition is built on. Who can shoot fastest, the most accurate, right? Let's flip aspirin in the air and shoot it with our .22. Not making fun of it, because I certainly am nowhere near that level of mastery. It is impressive. And yet, they either think or they're completely unaware of the fact that that's not how battles are fought. We don't flip aspirin into the air and shoot it with our rifles or our machine guns or anything else. This comes to an uncomfortable discussion where we have to recognize, if you were to ask, and I'm going to swag it here, right? I'm going to do my best guess, but I'm not being hyperbolic. As an infantryman, 9 years in the infantry, if you were to ask me how much time was spent towards, of any given year, of training and exercises and everything else, how much time is truly spent towards weapons proficiency, then I would argue probably around 5% of our year is spent towards weapon proficiency. You could certainly argue, people say, well, no, not in my unit, we did, 10%, 12%. But no one's going to argue magnitude. We might argue the specific percentage, but no one's going to say, what are you talking about? I didn't even dress myself. We only shot machine guns, and we did it naked because I didn't even know how to get dressed. No one has 100% of their time, or anywhere remotely close to that. It's in the single digits. And when I say weapon proficiency, you have to understand what that means for an infantryman. Yes, rifle, and designated marksman rifle, and squad automatic rifle, and machine gun. Well, let's throw the shotgun and the pistol in there periodically. Okay, well, 6 different systems. Hold on, let's throw explosives in there. We've got to handle hand grenades and grenade launchers. Plus we have landmines, both anti-personnel and anti-armor landmines. So we have all those explosives, but we're not done yet. We still have mortars, rocket launchers, and improvised explosive devices. Yes, we too learn. I mean, the combat engineers come out and show us how to make a field expedient Bangalore torpedo, how to use MOGAS to get a better effect with our claymores. So this is all wrapped in there. And depending on what unit you're in and what the national budget is and everything else, there's all sorts of variables that weigh in, but you are looking at single digit. If you say, well, this is how much responsibility and how much work I have to achieve in a single year as a U.S. infantryman, you would be hard pressed to get more than 4, 5, maybe 8, 9% on weapon systems. All of them. Yes, disproportionately on the rifle, but all of them. Well, what am I doing the rest of the time? And the answer is, unfortunately, I'm doing a whole lot of administrative things that we really don't want to be doing. But we're doing that. The rest of the time, somewhere 50, 60, 70% of our time are spent on small unit tactics and leadership. Mastering those arts. Well, let's go back to Kumdo and Heidong Kumdo. Kumdo is mastering the cut, the form, right? It's the psychomotor domain. Sure, it's other domains as well, but in terms of learning, this is the physical, move my body, psychomotor domain. When you get in force-on-force training, you are now moving your body in the fight. You're reacting and seeking the initiative. And so this is very much the cognitive and affective domains. Psychomotor is still involved, but it's overwhelmingly cognitive, and I would say very closely behind that would be the affective, the value system. That's what's going on in force on force. And it doesn't matter how dynamic we make a target, and I'm all for making them dynamic. Have them pop up, have them spin sideways, have them run back and forth and fall to the ground. This is good stuff, right? It's getting us to perfect our psychomotor skills of marksmanship and engaging those targets quickly, effectively. That's very important. But ultimately, I need a thinking enemy. I need a thinking opponent who's working in teams using brilliant leadership and tactics to defeat me. And I have to learn how to defeat them with my team and my leadership, my tactics. This is the power of force on force that no sword or bullet can offer us. We can't sling those at each other, we'll kill each other. And that is certainly not our goal, to kill our comrades. We have to find other systems, imperfect systems, keep in mind, that nothing acts like the sword and nothing acts like the bullet, except the sword and the bullet. So we have to find an imperfect system. And it is critical that we then, regardless of the fact that they're imperfect, okay, so there's some learning scars on the psychomotor side, perhaps, but on the cognitive and affective side, we are advancing our understanding of how we wage war, the art of waging war within the battle space. What are some of the systems that we use? Well, there is a preponderance of emphasis on projectile-based systems, and they each have their own unique advantage. You have to set your metrics and say, well, is cost one of my metrics? Is distance of engagement one of my metrics? Is operating environments, how well does this operate at -20 or 120 degree Fahrenheit? That's another metrics you can use. What's the, can I mitigate danger to bodily damage? There's a metric. You have to set your metrics of what you want to do for each training environment. The military has used a whole lot of simunitions and UTM. It's basically firing a blank cartridge that fires an aspirin that marks the target. Incredibly effective for the close-in fight, say clearing a trench or MOUT CQB, that is close quarter battle down a hallway or up a staircase, where you are remarkably close to each other, where Nerf can work in that. And talk about cheap, talk about very low damage to each other. It has some disadvantages. It doesn't mark the target, and so in a highly confused or low light situation, you may not know who got who. Like I said, it's an imperfect solution, but I have seen police, military, and One Shepherd Leadership Institute all use Nerf to great effect in their training, limited though it would be. Nerf is certainly viable. More commonly, we're going to see airsoft and paintball. They're very affordable. They're very good facsimiles of the contemporary weapon systems. So paintball and airsoft, equally viable. Once again, they're projectile based. And so, like simunitions and UTM, they only go so far. Here's a question I get asked. Well, could airsoft or paintball shoot out to 400 meters, 800 meters? And the answer is absolutely. Lewis and Clark had the Giardoni rifle, which was a great big BB gun. It was a BB and an air rifle that fired and took down deer at quite a distance. So my point is, we can put enough speed behind almost any projectile, but the problem is it flies right through a human being. So once again, the energy is the problem, and we have to cut it down. Are we relegated only to 35 meters and in, or 50 meters and in? And the answer is no. There's other systems out there, such as the Multiple Integrated Laser Engagement System that the United States Army, military, Marines, and all of our allies have been using since the late 1970s. Tanks use it, jets, fighter aircraft use it, helicopters use it, boats use it, and of course, infantrymen, riflemen, machine gunners, and designated marksmen, all of them, they use it as well. Incredibly powerful, but of course its greatest power is that you use the weapon, whatever the weapon is, at its actual maximum effective ranges. There are miles available, rarely to civilians, but there are multiple companies out there that offer that. Off the top of my head, if you're interested, that would be Polaris, S&S Training Solutions, Klein Machining, as well as, of course, One Shepherd Leadership Institute. But they're not the only viable force on force. Within limited parameters, all of your projectile base, including Nerf, are still viable for force-on-force training, and we learn so much from this. Thanks.